Today, we are jumping into the long and, let's be honest, pretty bloody history of human warfare. We're going to look at how the tech, the tactics, and the empires have totally reshaped the battlefield. But we're also going to ask a really important question. Has the fundamental nature of war actually changed at all? So, that's the big question for today. When you think about all our incredible leaps in technology, we've gone from sharpening sticks to launching drones. Has the core experience of war really evolved? Or are we just fighting the same old fights with newer, deadlier toys? To figure that out, we're going to break this down into 5 parts. First, we'll talk about the raw human experience. Then we'll look at the soldier, the weapons they use, the generals who lead them, and finally, what war always leaves behind. Let's get into it. All right, first up, the constant face of war. Before we get into all the fancy new technology and tactics, we really need to understand the one thing that has never, ever changed: the brutal, terrifying, up-close and personal experience of being in a battle. Just listen to that quote for a second. It's from a battle that happened over 600 years ago. But the chilling thing is, you could probably take that exact description and apply it to a battle in ancient Rome or a trench in World War I. It's just this visceral reminder that, at its heart, war has always been a grim, terrible business. So that brings us to our next question. If the experience of combat is this constant, brutal thing, what about the person right in the middle of it all? How has the warrior, the soldier, actually changed over the centuries? Well, let's just look at their gear. On one side, you have a bronze cuirass from ancient Greece. It was made to stop a spear or a sword. On the other, a modern flak jacket designed to stop bullets and shrapnel. The materials are worlds apart, but the basic idea? It's exactly the same. Protect the person inside. It's a straight line of evolution over thousands of years. But, armor was never just about stopping a weapon. Take this incredible samurai helmet. It's a work of art, right? 62 separate plates, all perfectly crafted. This isn't just a helmet. It's a symbol of who this warrior was, their status, their clan, their identity. It's a statement. And the fighters themselves evolved too. Let's just compare it to the most legendary soldiers in history, the Roman legionary and the Ottoman janissary. The legionary was a citizen soldier fighting for the glory of Rome with a sword and shield. But the janissary? He was part of a professional, elite force, loyal only to the Sultan, and an early adopter of firearms. We're talking totally different weapons, different loyalties, really a whole different way of life. And this quote from Lincoln really gets to the heart of it. Soldiers don't just fight for an emperor or a sultan. They fight for ideas, for nations, for causes that can literally rip a country in two. The why behind the fighting is every bit as important as the how. Okay, so what happens when the how, the tools of war, really start to change? Well, that brings us to our third section, the tools of destruction. This is where you see the most mind-blowing changes, where a single invention can completely rewrite the rules of battle. Let's just run through a few game changers. Around 1700 BCE, you get the war chariot. Suddenly you have speed and mobility on the battlefield. 1,000 years later, the Greeks perfected the trireme, basically making them masters at the sea. Fast forward to 1453, and massive cannons just demolish the walls of Constantinople, walls that everyone thought were unbreakable. And then in 1948, the helicopter shows up and adds a whole new dimension to warfare, changing everything from troop transport to saving lives. And sometimes you get an innovation that's just a stroke of genius, like the Korean turtle ship from the 16th century. This thing was a beast. It had an armored roof to stop cannonballs, spikes all over it to stop people from boarding, and cannons pointing out every side. It was basically a floating tank. But for all the high-tech gadgets, there's one problem that has stumped every general in history. How do you supply your army? For thousands of years, the best answer was a mule. In the 20th century, it was the helicopter. They're two totally different technologies, but they're solving the exact same problem Hannibal had when he was trying to get his army over the Alps. So you've got your soldiers, your weapons, your supply lines. Who is the one playing this giant, deadly game of chess? Well, that brings us to section 4, the commanders, the generals, and the art of leading an army. And a truly great commander can literally redraw the map of the world. Just look at this map of Charlemagne's empire. This huge territory didn't just happen by accident. It was built piece by piece through decades of smart campaigns and just sheer force of will. That's the power of one person's ambition. But victory isn't always won with flashy tactics on the battlefield.
When Peter the Great beat the Swedish army, it wasn't just his strategy. It was the boring stuff, the administrative reforms he made to make sure his army was fed and had warm clothes. Meanwhile, the Swedes were literally starving and freezing. It just proves that an army really does march on its stomach.
Of course, sometimes a commander's most powerful weapon isn't a weapon at all. It's their words. Churchill's speech didn't fire a single shot, but it gave the entire British nation the will to fight on during its darkest moment. That's a kind of power you can't measure in firepower. And that kind of powerful leadership can bring incredible numbers of people to your cause. In 1209, the call for a crusade went out, and 10,000 men showed up, ready to fight. But getting that many people onto a battlefield, well, it comes with a terrible price. 23,000. Just let that sink in. That's the number of casualties, killed, wounded, missing, in a single day at the Battle of Antietam. It's a staggering, almost unimaginable number, and it's a brutal reminder of the weight that rests on every single one of a commander's decisions. And that cost, that incredible human cost, brings us to our final section. After all the strategies are played out and the battles are won and lost, what is always left behind? What is war's unchanging legacy? This picture pretty much says it all, doesn't it? The names change, the locations change. It could be ancient Rome, a city in Europe, or here, a city in China. But the aftermath of war so often looks just like this: total, heartbreaking destruction. And this quote from a soldier in Vietnam, it's really tough to hear, but it captures the horrifying logic of modern war, where the sheer scale and impersonality of it all can just erase the line between soldier and civilian, leaving behind trauma that echoes for generations. And that brings us right back to where we started. We've seen armor evolve, weapons become things of science fiction, and strategies grow more complex than ever. But we've also seen that the soldier's fear, the commander's burden, and the devastation left behind, those are absolute constants. So it leaves us with one final, tough question. If the tools we use to fight are always new, but the human cost is always the same, what have we really learned?